Welcome to the first keynote speaker session. First, I'd like to thank our sponsors, our platinum sponsors, Just Brazil and the Albert Einstein Israeli Hospital. And then I'd also like to thank our gold sponsors, Logarithm and Legal Code. We have today our first keynote speaker, Joe Cohen. I'll say a few words about him, and then I'll say a few words about the firm that he's working at. Joe leads the innovation team at Dentons, UK, Ireland, and Middle East region. So it's a specific region that he covers. This includes responsibility for legal tech pilot projects and implementations, as well as other innovation culture initiatives, such as innovation training and design thinking, which is a growing area for legal tech. Prior to this, Joe worked as a non-lawyer. I'm not really sure what a non-lawyer is, but it's an interesting role. He held innovation positions at Linklaters, as well as Slaughter and May. And before that, he was a technology consultant for Deloitte. So Joe has a lot of experience at a lot of large law firms under his belt. I'll say just a few words about Deloitte. About Dentons. About Dentons. Dentons is the world's fifth largest law firm by revenue, almost $3 billion USDA gross revenue in fiscal year 2019, so large in terms of cash flow. In 2015, it was the largest law firm in the world in terms of numbers of lawyers, and it has the most offices of any law firm in the world. It operates in 77 countries and has 190 offices. That's 2015 numbers. We don't know exactly what it is now. So this is, globe-spanning large firm, and Joe is key to that. Joe, thanks very much for accepting the invitation to speak. Joe will speak about iRobot, how to use robotic process automation to automate certain legal work, and we look forward to your words. Thank you very much.
Perfect, thank you, Adam. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen, and then we'll get going. Okay, so yeah, thanks, Adam. So I'm Joe Cohen, I'm the innovation lead for Dentons UK, Ireland, Middle East, as I was saying. And today we're going to be talking about robotic process automation. We'll start off by defining what that is, and henceforth I'm going to define that as RPA. We're going to speak about how RPA fits into the wider legal tech landscape. We'll spend a while dwelling on exactly what that looks like, and particularly try and find the niche of RPA compared to some other legal technology platforms. Then I've got a video to show you as to exactly how we're using it in-house, something specific that we've created. And so, we'll go through exactly what that looks like. We'll then talk about, and this isn't applied for Dentons really, this is, talking about robotic process automation. We'll talk about how we're training our lawyers, not just with this technology, but with others as well. And again, I'm using it. We'll talk about how to choose RPA use cases, because there are many areas that it's not going to be suitable for. We'll talk about some of the risks, some of the pitfalls of using it. And then we'll round off by asking ourselves, well, okay, this has been interesting, but do all lawyers need this? Or some of them, or is it actually meant to be part of the back office function, etc. So let's start off. What is robotic process automation? For me, it is taking tasks away from people, away from lawyers, so that they can do higher value activities. And we've got now 3 principles that we're going to be abiding by for the rest of this presentation. The first one is we're only really going to be talking about using RPA to automate legal activities. I will reference from time to time non-legal activities, so that's from IT and finance and HR functions and stuff like that. But generally here we're talking about what can we actually take away from the lawyers so that they, as it's written above, can focus on the higher value activities. Point B, we're talking about things that ideally need to be repeatable. What you don't want to see is RPA being used to automate a process that only happens once as part of a bespoke client matter, or happens only very infrequently. What we're looking for here are things that happen, dozens, hundreds of times, thousands of times, And actually, you can see a really big time saving taking those tasks away from humans. And point C, we like in this context to work with structured data. And I know this is an academic audience, so I won't go into too much detail of what that is. But in particular, we're talking about, is the data frequently in the same place? Is it in the same format? Is it in the same language, that type of thing? If it's in a database, how often is it moved around? What we like to see is, static, always in the same place, with documents and things like that. And if we can adhere to all three of these points, then potentially we might have a use case for RPA. Okay, so that was like a very brief intro. I'm now going to go through a few different categories here of legal technology and talk about how they tackle automation. And hopefully by the end of this slide, we'll have a good idea of the niche of RPA. So when I'm talking about all these things, just try and focus on, okay, so if this is automation in transaction management, if this is automation in life cycle, then RPA sort of has a spoiler down here. Okay, so in terms of transaction management, and I've got a couple of examples here. So checklist automation and verification automation. So if you think about a banking transaction, you will have typically a couple of banks and the clients and the law firms all trying to gather all of the relevant documentation before the, say, loan is released, until the money is released. And so that would be, say, conditions precedents checklists, which would be gathering articles of association, board minutes, joint venture agreements, or whatever it might be, and making sure that everyone's happy with the contents of those documents and that everyone has the right versions agreed. And that would before have been lots of emails flying around, maybe a central sort of Excel spreadsheet. And the way that there's online platforms now that can essentially automate not only the production of this list, but also creating a Bible outlet as well. We use the Gatix, there's also Workshare Transact as well. And so, that is a specific piece of automation relating to banking transactions. And for verification, we're talking about documents like prospectuses or other initial public offering IPO documentation, where the law firm needs to actually go in and verify the veracity of each individual statement that is made in that prospectus. And so what that might have been before is printing out the document, circling each sentence or paragraph or page, but certainly could be each sentence, and assigning that sentence out to a lawyer who would then have to go and check, can I find proof for this statement? And therefore, if I can, we can keep its inclusion in the prospectus, which is sent out to potential investors. In terms of automation here, there are platforms, Atticus, ScribeStar, that will automatically go through the document, split it up into sentences, and assign those out to the lawyers. They can easily put their evidence behind each statement, and that creates an automated document at the end of it where you can sort of go through the prospectus, click on each sentence, and take you to the evidence. And so again, we're talking about tools which are time-saving for lawyers, but not RPA. Right. Moving on to the next one, document life cycles. What do I mean by that? I'm typically talking about drafting documents, negotiating documents, or signing documents, or storing documents as well. So it's typically a mix of those things. And so a couple of examples here of automation in this field. There are tools like Define or Contract Companion that will go in and for your document, put out all of the definitions and say whether they have corresponding entries in the definition section of the documents, and vice versa, whether our definitions at the front and they're actually not referenced in the body of the document. So a trainee typically would have had to go in and do the check themselves. It can be quite time consuming, but now the software can do it automatically and show you, okay, you need to put in definition here, remove this, or add this, and it saves a lot of time. Could potentially have actually been a robotic process automation use case, but there's already a product that does this, so we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. In terms of knowledge management, what we've got in this particular instance is I'm going to be talking about tagging documents. So what we try and encourage our lawyers to do, towards the end of transactions is think about what collateral, what documents have I produced that could be useful for either me or my colleagues on future transactions. And so what they do is they go into the document management system, right click on the document that they think, okay, this could be good knowledge, and click submit to knowledge management system as a button. Then what pops up is a box saying, please tag this document on the basis of this specific taxonomy. Is it a corporate document, is it a banking document, is it a disputes document, employment document? And the idea of automation in this space is that tagging process can be quite time consuming and possibly to the extent that actually discourages lawyers from wanting to go through that process in the first place. So automation in this space is the tagging system learning over time based on the title of the document or the practice group of the person trying to submit the document, or even the contents itself of the document, what the tags might be. So then the lawyer is thinking, okay, are the tags that the system is recommending to be correct, as opposed to having to go and figure what those tags are themselves. In terms of collaboration, a good example here is task templates. So at the beginning of a matter, as long as you have done the work beforehand and thought about, okay, for this matter, what are the 10 or 20 must-do tasks for everyone? What you can do is, when the next matter comes in of this ilk, you can just spin up the task templates, automatically assign them to the rest of the team. And that encourages people to firstly use the task management system in the first place, also saves a lot of time trying to figure out who does what. So AI for document review, or maybe machine learning you might prefer to call it. So typically here, we're talking about a virtual data room that has capabilities of reading the contents of the documents. So it's not just about traditional virtual data rooms that are just simple document repositories. Here, the algorithms actually go into the context and try to figure out, are there any clauses they recognize, data points, and things like that. So automation in this case is, can I get the system to extract and display for me all of the assignment clauses on these thousands of commercial contracts or employment contracts, or these leases? Can it tell me all the termination provisions? Can it tell me all of the liability provisions? And this just, again, saves the lawyer time having to go and find them. So that's what we're talking about. That is the type of automation that AI can do for us, and what we're looking at reviewing documents, typically in a due diligence context. We have research automation as well. So legislation research automation. Denton's via our Next Law Ventures portfolio, where we invest in legal tech startups. We have a stake in a fund called Librio, which automates the tracking of changes to legislation in different jurisdictions. So let's say a client comes to us, we're thinking of doing a project in this jurisdiction, this country that we've done anything before. Our initial research says that we need to make sure we're compliant with these 3 regulations, but not just now, also in the future. So what they don't want to do and what we don't want to do is constantly be tracking, has it changed, is it, what's changed in this legislation. And so this Librio tool can essentially do that for you. But it's not, you might think, okay, well, if it's just a piece of legislation that's changing, maybe RPA could do that. But actually, it's more complicated because in the most well-developed jurisdictions, like the EU, for example, all of the legislation is digital. But in many jurisdictions, it isn't, and in some, it's even it's very unclear when or if it has changed. And even then, it could be just a notice pinned on a notice board in the local courthouse. And so actually, it fails the structured data test in that instance. And then we've got mapping visualization here. So this is software that will, and I think it may only work in but be interested here in the questions if there is software similar to this globally. But essentially, for our real estate lawyers, having a map overlaid with freehold and leasehold information, so you can click on a property, immediately see who the proprietors are, and what the address is, and any other information, saving the lawyer having to go to multiple different sources to gather that information. Just sort of rounding off, so we've got legal project management here as well. The automation of the pricing and budgeting tools, it could potentially be seen as RPA. So this is about making sure that we've got a repository of all of our fee earner rates and clients discounts and client rates and stuff like that in an interactive tool, so that the lawyers can easily just plug in numbers for a specific matter and make sure that all the data going into it is correct. We use that generally via things like Excel macros, but possibly RPA could also fill in the gap there. And again, the timelines, just having automatic editable timelines available for lawyers to keep stuff from scratch. And then finally, onto automation then. We've got document automation, which is about, can we take a precedent document, like a commonly used legal document that's been approved by our internal lawyers, and instead of starting from that each time, or instead of starting from the last document I used on a specific deal, can I actually turn that into a questionnaire, which, depending on my answer to the questionnaire, will spit out different versions of that document. So, if I answer, if I tick these multiple choice boxes in the questionnaire, it will insert this clause, but remove this sub clause, etc. And it's just a much safer way of starting a matter, as opposed to trying to remove different document blobs and doing Control F and Control places and stuff like that. So then we have RPA. So again, generally the things that I've been speaking about here will fail one of the three tests. There we go. So, okay, I'm now going to give you an example of how dentists are using RPA. So the example I'm going to use is the automation of a company search report. We have, and this is essentially a Word document that's filled out on a transaction that might be involving 100 different companies, trying to find out things like who the directors are, who the shareholders are, what the address is, what the company number is, the director, company secretary information, whether they filled in that form, whether they did X, Y. And this would usually be performed by a trainee and would take 30 to 45 minutes per company. So if we could possibly automate this, it would be a massive time saving represented. Typically, the data comes from company's house. The output is usually a Word document, and the input that we're interested in is typically just an Excel of all the different company numbers. So I'm going to bring up the video here. So, okay. This is a video of not of the code behind the automation, but just a video of what the automation is actually doing. So the first thing that we're seeing here is person goes in and types who the requester is. In reality, this is actually part of our portal, and so it's already notes who it is, but just for purposes of this demonstration. So having a look at the company numbers, it's pulling up that spreadsheet, and now it's asking us where am I putting it into, and then where am I saving it down to. Okay. So I'll just skip a little bit forward. So the company we're doing is going to be Denton's, just for the purpose of this demonstration. And what we're actually seeing here is the machine is going through all of the different places where we've pre-programmed it to look, and it's copying a whole host of information onto the clipboard. So you can see it doesn't look like it's actually doing much, but actually in the background it's going into all of these different tabs, all of the different documents in the filing history tab, and it is copying lots of different information to the clipboard. So this is the search form. So let's see now what the machine is going to do. This is all automatic, by the way. The user's totally stopped interaction now. So actually, as you can see here, we've got different placeholders for company overview link, company name, company number, requester, nature of business, previous names, generic contact information. You can see lots of placeholders here. And it's the machine that has actually gone into company's house, found where they are, and is now going to insert them in. So you can see here, there's automatic requester. Let's get it grabbing the company name. Just skip forward slightly. So now it's having a look at for the statutory register section. It's actually going through and checking on company's house. Did it have that form and not that form? Did it have that form? That form, and it's a bit of logical interface here to actually check whether it's one or the other. You can see it's the no that is here. And now it's calculating, has the company filed one or more forms on or off the state? So again, a bit of relatively basic factor information, but still having to check that. Now it's pulling up, previous names, direct information, accounts overdue, filing information, who the shareholders are, and it's going to grab those now. Obviously, it's all public information, and then by the end of it, we'll sort of finalize the document. But hopefully, from there, you can see roughly what it is that we're talking about when we're referencing trying to save fee earner time, because the fee earner in that case didn't have to really exercise too much judgment. It was about going into company's house and trying to just find the right information, copy and paste it into the right form. And as I said, it could potentially be hundreds of these done per transaction. So we're talking about potentially we haven't managed to automate 100% of the form, quite a long form, but I reckon 80% of it, and we're sort of increasing its complexity. And now if we think back to the three tests, obviously the first one, this is a legal task, it's something the lawyers are specifically doing. Repeatable, because it's done quite frequently. And in terms of structured data, this company's house website, which is the UK website on company information, the data is always in the same place. So the URL is always essentially company's house, or whatever it is, / the company number. So it's always easy to find the right site. And the filing dates and the director's information is always displayed in the same place. So the machine is able to actually go and grab that information. There is actually a company's house API, which we are also experimenting with. But just for the purposes of this, it's good to show what you can do when there is no API. So you might be thinking, well, hold on a second, what about the documents listed on the website like this? So that's where it gets quite interesting. We are actually using the RPA to extract information from those documents as well. But we're using, well, firstly, they're all scanned documents, so we need to use optical character recognition technology to render that more machine readable. But within those documents, the format is also the same. So it's not like we're having to go into the annual reports and the annual accounts, because they will be bespoke per company, and there's not much we can teach the RPA to actually render from those documents. But yeah, so hopefully that was interesting. A task that saves our viewers a lot of time, very repeatable, and the data that goes into it is structured so we can at least rely on the rest of that information is completed company's reports. Okay, so we've got here just a quick sidebar as to our innovation training scheme. And this is about how are we training our lawyers to get to know not just RPA, but some other very interesting pieces of legal technology. So the first thing we do is we give them these e-learning modules to do before they join the firm. So at the moment, this is for all of our trainees. Well, certainly will be from September, all of our trainees. And we collaborated with a leading local law school, BPP, to actually put together these e-learnings. So we've got introduction to technology, introduction to design thinking, intro to innovation, intro to system design and data, and then process mapping as well. So the idea is before they join, they all have to do all of these e-learnings. And then the minute they get in the building, in their first seat. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, the way that the training contract works in the UK is it's 4 times 6 months, so it's a 2-year scheme, and they have to change departments 4 times. So for these practical exercises, they have a menu of 7, and they have to do 4 of them over a 2-year period. So we've got down here, as you can see, use RPA software to automate a simple process. So this is definitely part of the training scheme. We've got here train up our AI system, which is Luminance, and I know other density solutions use Kira, and there's actually lots of tools out there. We've got Contract Express to automate the document. This is what I was talking about before in terms of the questionnaire. A legal design thinking hack of a document type. So this is actually not technologically related at all. This is about can we optimize the visuals and the visual representation of some of our legal documents. So one of the trainees who did this actually turned a 5-page client memo into a flowchart. So the whole document turned into a flowchart. Client found it a lot more relatable. It was meant to be a document that was frequently used. And having it in that flowchart format allowed them to actually utilize it more effectively each time. We've got data visualization as well. So this is about can we use AI to garner insights from our department documents. So, for example, can we grab 200 or 500 share purchase agreements that the firm has worked on in the last 5 years or whatever, and say, for these documents, can we get insights per client or per sector or per industry on any clauses that are appearing in the documents, or or maybe disappearing, or the amounts going up, the insurance amounts going up, things like that. And actually trying to take advantage of the breadth of data that we have available at the law firm, possibly for just internal insights, but also for market-facing research as well. And obviously here we have the RPA module. And what I didn't say before about the previous example was actually it was 2 trainees that came up with that. They learned how to use the software. We told them how to use the software. And they decided on a use case and actually built the prototype as well. So after that, we've had to get some of my team involved. And we also had 2 RPA engineers to help us really grow this around the business. But it really shows the creativity that young lawyers can actually bring to the table once they're given the right tools and the opportunity. So we're going to talk a little bit now about choosing our robotic process automation use cases. Now, I said before, we can see at the top right, just a reminder of the principles. But talking about legal, you can automate one way to do it is to focus on the individual practice group needs. So have a session, a workshop with the banking group, with the corporate group, with the real estate group, and lay down on the table a little bit like what I've done today. What is automation? What should I be looking for and try and tease out some of the repeatable exercises that involve structured data to and then take those away and work with the team to try and get some of those things automated. Or you can do the trainee, the junior lawyer approach. So practice group agnostic, just speak to all of the trainees and paralegals and groups, try and get them to think about some of the tasks that they're actually carrying out that might be able to be automated. If you want to think about cross-practice group automation, we would recommend doing workshops directly with partners, the ones that are most likely to have the cross-practice relationships. And as a catch-all at the bottom, we've got idea competitions. So, sending out, using idea software or just by email, a message to the whole firm saying, here's a short description of what automation is, here's what we're looking for, please everyone submit your ideas. So there's a few different ways of getting to those use cases. Now, talking about functional, by functional I mean non-legal. And actually Adam mentioned before, what does non-lawyer mean? Well, typically a lot of people in my role formerly were lawyers. But actually I think there's now myself and a great number of people who haven't practiced law, who are able to nevertheless perform this legal innovation role. So that's just a quick sidebar. But in terms of using RPA in IT, in HR, in finance, in business development, all corporations have these departments, and actually have some industries have been doing this for quite a long time. And so when I'm talking about well-defined market, there's lots of examples out there of how to use robotic process automation in IT, in HR, whatever. So you're looking at invoicing systems. So the invoices that you as a company are sending out typically always look the same. So that's great for robotic process automation to scan incoming invoices to try and apportion them directly to your accounting system. We've got accounts reconciliation, automatic invoice sending and just receiving, adverse media scans for the Know Your Client or anti-money laundering legislation, payroll processing, user permissions management. All of these things involve very repeatable structured data tasks. And there's lots of information out there. We're not going to go too much deeper into it during this presentation. The other thing that you can do is speak to implementation consultants. So RPA for legal activities is pretty new. But as I say, for this is quite well developed, and there's plenty of RPA implementation consultants out there that will be able to help you on that journey. So, an example to think about maybe the pitfalls, the dangers or the risks of RPA. Will RPA work for contract management? So we've had a look before at the company search form, and that works quite well. But let's look at an example lease. So this is the contract. So I've grabbed this lease from just randomly available online. We've got in here, I've done the Adobe fill and sign. So all I've done here is start to put down some information. So lease shall terminate on 2022, for example. So we can see here there's actually a lot of gaps for us to fill in, and if we just take it at face value and as a potential tenant we just fill it in and accept terms, then that can be very interesting for RPA. What is the rental allowance? I've put those in here. I've got the term date, the termination date. You can see there's lots of different gaps here that I can fill in. And as a landlord, I might have 1,000 tenants, and they would all be able to fill in this lease. And there would actually be quite interesting to see whether a platform would be able to just extract all this information for me and tell me, okay, for my 1,000 tenants, what will the term start dates for the leases, when are all the termination dates, how much I'm paying, and like I say, it's spreadsheet format. And this would be, save me loads of time to go into each lease and check them and set reminders and things like that. So if that's what we're going for, then it could actually be relatively interesting. But there are some risks. that was our template. What if we're using third-party templates? Then immediately the RPA would fall over because it fails a structured data test. We would be able to teach for our template, we'll be able to teach the RPA exactly what to look for. But as soon as that template changes, then the whole thing falls apart. Similar with major edits to your template. We're just thinking about the use case of if the tenant just accepts all the terms, and that's one thing. But if they make any changes and to particular clauses or particular data points that we're interested in, the whole thing gets much more difficult. Again, handwritten dates or names or edits, very common with leases. I just did the Adobe text entry, but some people may decide to print and scan. Very, very difficult for RPA if we're introducing those sorts of changes. Similar for attachments or appendices, any extra references that we've not taught it. Again, it's not going to recognize it. And this introduces risks to the process because that might happen and the machine doesn't find anything, it gets the wrong information, you're not necessarily going to know about it. Talking about changes, so DIDS variations is how we deal with changes to leases in this country. And again, so it wouldn't necessarily be able to map any changes from one lease versus the deed. And suddenly our contract management system is actually looking a little bit patchy. So instead, could we use AI for this? And we do. We do. We don't have a contract management system like this, because we're not massive landlords, for example. But certainly, we do a review of a lot of leases, and we use a system called DealSum, and again, other regions use Kira. And what we're asking ourselves here is, okay, obviously the template lease that we start with, that we send out, is our ideal positions for everything. But we want the contract management system or the AI system to tell us if by the time the final contract is negotiated, what has changed, and in particular, what has changed with regards to what we would find acceptable. So has the liability clause changed from the original position to a fallback A position, or is it a fallback B position, or is it some other bespoke position that the partner has to sign off on and there has to be lots of back and forth on? This is valuable data for us. Why? Because if we figure out that there's a particular clause in our lease, contract or whatever, that constantly changes, that never get accepted by the other side, we may want to actually just change the position itself. If it's just wasting valuable negotiation time, we might decide it's not even worth it and just change it from the outset. And this is something that our Helix managed services offering does really well for clients. But in order to do this, we need to go down to each clause level in great detail. And so this, even using AI for contract management at more than a basic level, gets quite difficult. Anytime that you're introducing very, very minor changes that can have very major impact. So even adding one word to the clause can flip the whole meaning. And so AI needs to be able to recognize that. And I think that is somewhere that AI is not currently able to do effectively at this moment in time. So we're just going to round off now before we take some questions. Should all lawyers have to learn how to use RPA? And so hopefully this has been like an informative talk on RPA, how it fits into the wider legal tech market. And so, to address this topic, it is harder to automate work at the senior end. There is no doubt about that. But at the same time, senior lawyers do have good ideas for more complex automations. And I suppose the point is that we teach our junior lawyers more for longer term understanding and trying to turn them into robotic process automation coders. And we're actually seeing the benefits of that already. So the trainees that did this module in their last seat are taking those ideas into their current seats, their current departments, and suggesting some really interesting examples of either using this technology or combining with some of their colleagues to have more holistic solutions. And so it's not just about the initial training for these specific robotic process automation platforms, but actually as they go through their careers, to have a good knowledge of all of the technology that's out there, we think is extremely valuable. And so we think that as the trainees progress through our business, and all of them have learned how to do either this or document automation or AI systems or design thinking and have this well-rounded knowledge, they will actually be able to think in different ways in terms of client delivery. And that's what we're going for. And I think that's all I've got for this presentation, but really keen to hear those questions. I don't know, Adam, if you're going to have anything.
Great. Thanks so much, Joe. Very interesting talk, I think. Also, if I could just say that at Swansea University, where we have a legal tech LLM, we're teaching law school students some of these topics, and I'm very pleased to hear the kinds of things that you do with your trainee law staff is very much on target. So it's clearly an area where law schools and law firms are very interested in teaching automation in various dimensions. Let me just ask the organizers of the platform, did they gather any questions from the audience? Because I didn't get any on my side, although I can ask a few just to come up with. So if Alina perhaps will chime in. Not sure how that part of the presentation was going to be handled. No? Okay. Well, then I'll just ask a couple of general questions. I found it really very interesting, to get an overview from you about what's going on at Dentons and the kind of work that you do. I guess one general question I had was about structured documents. You gave us some instances of structured documents. The main focus that you mentioned was that there's a constancy about the documents, where they're located and the fields in them and things like that. Are there discussions at Dentons about using machine readable documents, that is using knowledge graph or markup languages or these kinds of things that provide you with semantic information in a structured manner about documents and harvesting data from them?
It's an interesting question, actually. It's something that we've been thinking about, but it does, in order to, it really is a huge shift in the way that lawyers work. It's not, a lot of the stuff that I've been speaking about today fits into, roughly fits into existing working patterns and identifying sort of one change at a time. For example, thinking about AI systems, it's about, lawyers will still be able to view the documents if they want to, but the AI will be able to bring out the clauses for them. Trying to doing what you say, which is basically going to right to the beginning and saying, you have to use this system for document drafting. In fact, some people are proposing industry-wide wording for document sets, and that works well with things like LMA. They've got the one NDA thing, which is also potentially very interesting. I think it's something that we're keeping an eye on. I do agree that there's a lot to be said for having much more document standardization across law firms. It would, I think it would be beneficial for a lot of different parties.
That's an interesting remark that you're sort of leading towards, because there's a big advantage to having standardization and adopting standards for all sorts of document representations, but it also presents a bit of a challenge, because firms kind of make a good deal of their market from unique documents, right? By in effect, saying, we have specific bits of information. So there's a bit of a tension between saying, we'll use standards that are, exchangeable bits of information, versus how do we keep our clients close to us because we're offering something unique. How do you manage that sort of situation?
Oh, I mean, look at the LMA, how the LMA documentation has revolutionized banking law. It's not, our banking department in terms of headcount and profit and whatever continues to grow, and our client relationships remain intact. So I think that once everyone is in the same boat, I think that it's, it has benefits for the industry.
Right. So you move off into some other aspects of the business rather than the unique structure of the document.
And knowledge is not just documentation. Knowledge is also, personal experiences, not knowledge that isn't deliverable. So internal guidance, practice notes, advice notes, other research tools as well. So it's not just about precedents and precedent management.
Great. Okay. Let me slip in one other question, and then we'll take some more questions from the audience. There's a few coming in. I'll just ask one more. What are some of the biggest challenges that you see coming over the horizon for Dentons and for applying automation?
Well, some of our lawyers seem to think that we're moving at such a pace that we're not going to have anything automatable left, which I think is not going to be the case. There'll always be something. What are the biggest challenges? I think just getting enough buy-in to some areas where, that there may be a bit of internal resistance, as that there will be, not just at all law firms, but all companies for this sort of thing. Capacity, to process all of this stuff. The way that we're going to be structuring our robotic process automation dedicated engineers is going to be half legal, half non-legal stuff, so half back office. So there's always going to be a few different things there to manage. But yeah, we're very excited about this RPA journey and how it's going to hopefully make a big difference to the lives of our lawyers.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much for addressing my questions. Let me turn to the questions from the audience. One question is, does the Dentons team create the training that's given to trainees and lawyers? So is it all built in-house for your trainees and for your lawyers?
So the e-learnings I was talking about before, they are that we started with some stuff that BPP had done and tailored it towards us. So I think that there is a legal technology innovation and design course that BPP offer, which is like it's the basis of the ones that we have. For the practical tiers, all of it is our stuff. The processes that people have to follow, we basically had to write. The technology isn't ours. Let's just clarify. We don't own Contract Express. We don't own Luminance. We just use the products, and give them to the robotic process automation tools we use. By the way, are Microsoft Power Automate and UiPath. So and I'm sure there are other tools out there as well. Yeah, we don't own any of them. It's just about putting them in the hands of our lawyers.
Okay. Thank you. And there's another question that's also about training. What are the biggest pedagogical challenges in training lawyers in this area? And how do you think you can overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so I think, it's an interesting question. I mean, before we did this scheme, there was a huge knowledge gap as to, what the possibilities were. And so that's basically why we've done it in this way. For me, I would say the most important bit of the training is the practical exercises bit. We think this sort of distinguishes our scheme. And I would say that a big challenge would be having just the e-learnings and not the practical. That I think is the most important thing. Getting the lawyers hands-on with the technology is the best way to overcome, oh, okay, I see that this is there, you're telling me about these different tools. I'm doing an e-learning about these different tools. I'm even, attending firm-wide webinars about this technology, that technology, but until you use it, it's not real for you. And I think that is why we've gone down the route of, it's not forced innovation, because whilst they do have to do it, they've got quite a wide remit to do, basically whatever they want. They make their choices as the modules, they make their choices as to the use cases. So there's plenty of creative freedom to be had there. But just the mere fact of, having to learn how to use Contract Express or learning how to use Luminance, we think has massive benefits. not just for the training scheme, but as I've said a few times, you know, benefiting not just them throughout their careers, but also the future of the firm.
Okay. Actually, if I could just follow up on that kind of question, to me, it's a bit interesting to explore the conceptual difficulties that trainee lawyers have. And I'll just talk a little bit from my experience and point of view. At Swansea, I have a course in computational thinking for the master's students in the law school. And, you know, we teach them a bit about how to take a problem and decompose it into its parts, and what are the relationships between the actors and the actions and the objects, and then try to teach people a bit about abstraction. So it's not just one specific instance that you're talking about, but a lot of instances that may have small variations. But then when you sort of look at this a little bit at a higher level, there's similarities across the board. And then also some things about how do you apply a logic. So if you have this and that, then something else follows. So those things I find for some students are rather difficult. Those are different levels of abstract thinking on top of the specific material. Are those kinds of conceptual issues things that you find, or are there other ones as well that you find that your lawyers have difficulty with?
It's interesting. It is very interesting, the point you're making. And what we actually find is, because typically the trainees tackle, they get to choose their own use cases, they tackle things which they have done themselves. And so there's no conceptuality there. It's that they inherently have been, you know, frustrated or whatever, thinking, oh, I've got to do these 100 documents again or whatever.
Right.
And so actually, I see what you mean by we could make this very abstract. And that's sort of why the e-learnings are good to start, but they, in order to really drive it home, as I'm sure you do, I'm sure there's practical exercise in your course as well. It's very important to, but in this case, it's even more so because it's not something which they've having to learn how to do one way and then automate, say. It's something which they've already been doing. And so we don't at the beginning of each seat, that's not when the training course starts. It's after a couple of months, so they've got a few, you know, to get bedded in and to start thinking about what they might be doing.
Okay, terrific. Are there any other questions from the audience coming in? I haven't seen any in the meantime. Just wait a sort of pause for a second there for something to come in. Okay, well, that looks like that. Thank you so much, Joe, for coming and telling us about what you're doing and what Denton's doing. There's a tremendous amount of activity in the legal tech space, and I think that academics who sometimes are involved in rather abstract-looking formal approaches are still very interested in what's going on in industry. So much has changed in the last 4 or 5 years, and increasingly there's sort of like an integration of different ways of thinking. So we look forward to hearing more about what's going on and sharing more when we get the opportunity. So thank you very much again, and I'm sure the audience thanks you as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Adam, and thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Have
See
a good
you.
day.
Bye.
Enjoy the conference. Bye.